we both usually double check if we are Oh, we're now streaming. Okay, I hit the wrong button, but that's good. I was the next step. All right. So we are now streaming. So any special notes to take care of before we get started? Or do you want to just run into it?
We can just roll. Throw it to me though, because I got like an announcement or two.
Announcements. Sweet.
Yeah.
Right on.
Okay. Well, now that it's streaming, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna just do the little confirmation that Nope, we're good. Okay. That was it. Perfect. All right. Let's do it. 3, 2, 1. All right, guys, welcome back to the Agora Podcast. It's me, Penguin, here with Sec Agora, and we have some special guests. It's another Into the Void, so I'm sure you're pretty used to that if you're a listener to our show. Could be your first time. It'd be special edition, though, for our Into the Void series. We have Brian and Ellen Sovereign here joining us for another one. I guess we can call this the 11th Void, or maybe it's a special edition. I don't know. But how you guys doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, it's always great to have a lady join, instead of the usual sausage fest we engage in here on Into the Void.
I'm pretty good at breaking those.
I figured we'd bring on the brains of the operation, Brian. So
yeah. Actually, like everything I say is all scripted by Ellen. It's not.
You're just the hired muscle, right?
Yeah, exactly. I have no independent thought whatsoever.
Wow, we're really lifting the veil here.
Yeah, truth's out. So
yeah. She's the woman behind the curtain, as they say.
That's right.
As the creative director of Sovereign Technica, I accept.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Well, hey, before we get going, I had the pleasure of an author who's a fan of the show, is a science fiction writer, and I just wanted to give them a shout out because they sent me a couple of books, and I have not read them, broke into them yet, but they look pretty interesting. And the author is Jason Z. Christie. Brian, have you ever heard of him?
I feel ashamed that I have not, just
Okay.
because I'm such a diehard science fiction. Actually, I'm a walking science fiction encyclopedia, really. But that's awesome. Okay, tell us more.
They're relatively new. I think this was written in 2018.
Oh, okay.
So this series is called Perfection Labs, and he sent me the first two books. And I'm looking at the second book right now, and it's basically like the premise is, what if the Messiah came and didn't actually give a damn about humanity? So
what does he want then?
What's I don't know. He just hangs out, I guess. I have no idea, but
just chilling.
Let me just read you the back. It says, what if the Messiah didn't give a damn? Alien game designer Prail thought making a little brother for herself would be a good idea for some reason. Her equal, someone she could trust. Instead, she got Pex, sent to Earth to overthrow it as a game. He's nothing but trouble. Instead of religion and politics, he pursues cigarettes and fish sandwiches, pop culture, and poetic justice.
Wow.
I'm totally in. I think this is going to be a good book. But shout out to Jason Christie. I haven't had time to read them yet, but I will make time this winter.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check those out. That kind of reminds me of like the Jungian concept that Jesus didn't die for our sins, he died for God's. And I love that. Always a good twist on the Messiah. I can get behind that.
Yeah, I like it. I like alternative history and stuff like that coming into the future. That's, you guys were talking about Stargate the other day, and that's kind of like the pinnacle of that, with like it's an alternative ancient aliens kind of history, but in the modern day with all the tech and space travel and stuff like that. So that's my jam.
Right on.
Ellen, welcome to Into the Void. You are,
thanks for having me,
the first guest that we've had on Into the Void, unless you count Brian. But Brian,
I always count Brian.
Yeah. No. Thank you. Yeah, no. I mean, it's always kind of been the three of us, and I've even teased this on my show lately. It's like, yeah, maybe we should bring some other voices into these wild conversations that we get into when we get into the weird and all of this. And I mean, the funny thing is, I think Ellen, of course, is my wife for one, but for two, I think she's smarter than all of us combined, and and she also, has if credentials matter, and there's debate on that. If credentials matter, she actually has credentials, unlike us. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Take it with a grain of salt.
Right, but I mean, you are a genuinely brilliant woman. Why don't you? Do you want to give a little quick background, just in case someone doesn't know who you are?
Sure. Oh yeah, Brian, you're like good at this stuff. Yeah, you should probably introduce yourself for anybody that doesn't know.
Yeah, that's all right.
I just kind of assumed everybody knows, but that's bad. All right.
Thank you.
We'll give her a moment to hop on the pedestal here.
No,
So go for it.
Also, not her first time on the show.
That's true. I have been on this show in the past. I think it was
Oh,
a
that's
whole
right.
panel that we did with like 8 other people about
Yeah, the food
food.
panel.
Mhm.
Yes, that was phenomenal, and you were great.
That was dynamite from start to finish. That
Yes.
panel we did.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Evergreen episode to go back and listen to for sure. So but why don't you go ahead and give just a brief introduction?
Okay. Well, I'm Ellen Sovereign, the creative director of Sovereign Technica, as I mentioned before. I publish all of Brian's newsletters. I help edit his stuff, whatever he puts out. Sometimes I co-host on Sovereign Technica. Besides that, as far as like my educational background, I have degrees in bioengineering and chemical engineering. And I currently work as an engineer at I don't know if I want to say, but
Yeah, well, at a very large medical company.
It's a place where I get to work in cell and gene therapeutics.
Right.
So it's very exciting.
Yeah.
And I always learn something new every day.
Real change the world stuff, though.
Yeah.
Genuinely. Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. And also politically, you align as in...
Well, nothing, actually.
Yeah. Yes. Right
I
on.
don't align with anyone politically.
Good.
I kind of just stand on
We're
my
here.
own fringes.
But you describe yourself as an anarchist, yes?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I more so believe in anarchy than any other political system.
Right. The anti-system. So, all right. So anything else you want to get out there, or?
I'm excited for the future of Sovereign Technica.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
You are currently working on a couple things. I don't know if we should break the news, but it's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, well, we'll let it settle just for now. But I like the tease. And you're in rare company of knowing what goes on behind the scenes at my own show, which of course everybody can check out. Just go to nwo.red. I always love getting to toss that one out there because that freaks everybody out.
I know. Every time I hop on here, I'm like, "Hello, humans," but it occurred to me that it's like I'm 80% sure Brian's a reptile. So I'm pretty sure. I mean, he wears glasses all the time, so I don't think you can see the lids blink sideways.
Oh yeah, my
yeah.
nictitating membrane. I mean, if I had a nictitating membrane, right? Yeah.
Right, of course.
Yeah, gotcha.
Well, what was your old one? It was like Zog dot what ninja? Or something?
ZOG.ninja.
Yeah, that was hilarious too. So
yeah, all of those still work. So people are welcome to find me any way they want. That's still my favorite one, actually, is Zog.ninja.
I remember hearing one of the you did that conspiracy with Bert Van Aert, that whole conspiracy theory.
Yeah, Conspirathon. Yes.
And then at the end, you're like, you can find me at Zog.ninja. My favorite part of that whole thing. This is awesome.
Oh man, I've been playing the long game on this one for sure. So yeah.
Well, so anyway, okay, let's to more serious business. Sorry, I've had a lot of caffeine.
Same.
So I've been digging you guys doing the Sovereign Tech X shows.
Oh, thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, you guys go deep. It's good. I really did. I've been listening to that and I enjoy that as well, because you guys get into the weird a little bit there too.
Occasionally.
Occasionally, yeah. But you get into some deeper topics and that, and part of the reason I was going to have, or I suggested we have you on, Alan, is the two of you had talked about some topics that I thought might be useful to expand upon on a Into the Void. Essentially, X is like it's similar to Into the Void, except you keep things slightly more grounded, and we get a bit crazy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, putting the X at the end is just an excuse to talk about whatever we want.
Right.
But yeah, we don't get as we don't jump as far off or jump the shark as much as we do here. So.
Yeah, I don't think we have discussed anything that's really like supernatural or esoteric or
hinted at
mind bending. Yeah, we have hinted, but but you guys really go the whole distance.
Yeah, we like it. We like it here.
We are comfortable in the void, So, well, so I really wanted to delve into psychedelics and the CIA, but if you guys don't mind, let's hold off on that for a second, because I wanted to talk about something that might be related, and I don't know how to really explain this, but you both would consider yourself sort of what they might call green anarchists, yeah?
Yeah, I'd run with that.
Green as in like ecologically conscious and
yes.
aware and respectful of the environment, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And you both are, let's say, spiritual in some sense, or is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'm a Kabbalist straight up, and yeah,
I think that's fair to say.
Okay, so it seems to me, and we might have talked about this before, I don't know, my memory is gone, but it seems like now is the time, for some reason, that both spirituality and sort of getting back to nature are, I don't know, useful as not only as like just a good thing to do for your own personal personal growth and that sort of thing, but also like a useful strategy for the liberation of humans. And this might have been less of the case in years past, and it seems more crucial now, at least to me. So you two are probably slightly more articulate than I am. Do you agree? And if so, I don't have any other reason for thinking this other than it just feels right. So I don't have any kind of like logical argument to back this up. It just seems to be the case. And I don't think I'm the only one that thinks this way. And what, if you agree, like, why now? Or why is this seemed to be coming more to the front in recent years, as opposed to in years past, it not being sort of a priority? Go ahead. I'll let you guys answer.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
You go first, Brian.
Me? Okay. Yeah. So I think you're right. And I think, in ways that, few ways we have for any kind of objective truth, I think you can prove that it's actually happening. I listen to, as a podcaster for, over a decade. Obviously, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts as part of my craft for many years. And one of the things I've been noticing recently is so many podcasts from people who were either, say, more into like the more direct Western health space, I guess you could say, as well as technologists. Just in the past year, like they've really come out. And I mean, I could name a lot of names, but they've really started coming out with this statement that no, magic has to come back. Magic needs to be a thing again. And now their reasons, they're they have varying reasons around all of this, but it's just to point at that this gestalt is certainly it's real, I think. My thinking on it, and certainly it's part of the reason that I've become far more open about my practicing of Kabbalah, is I think we counted, considering the remarkable changes and advances that happened in the 20th century, particularly. I think a lot of people expected this continued upward climb of progress due to science and technology and medicine. And now that we're in, at this point of this recording, 2023, we haven't, while the standard of living has gone up, the quality of life has not. And I think a lot of people have come to kind of really a stone cold realization that technology isn't a solves all. That medicine, modern medicine, Western medicine, may not be a solves all. It may not have all the answers. I think there's, and also as globalization kind of, came to much more of a reality, I think a lot of people also feel a lack of genuine connection with each other. And so there's this pull back to having smaller communities. And this has happened before. The Back to the Land movement, right? Like Mother Earth News and all that all happened back in the 60s. And people were going back to the land at that point. And I think that was largely a response to a lot of, ironically, it was also a response to computers then, and computers then were nothing like they are now. But, to this automation, to this lack of connection with other human beings. And again, I think that's where spirituality comes in as well. It's like, no, technology isn't solving this. In fact, if anything, it's making things worse in its present implementation. And, what is something that exists higher than scientific understanding and technological implementation and perhaps even medicine. And I think a lot of people look at spirituality. Now, fortunately, I don't see them really. I mean, there's somewhat of a push to going to a more conservative Christianity type of religion, which I think is unfortunate. But by and large, it's people, really taking what works for them and, packaging it together into a real individual spiritual practice today. So that's I think this is, again, it's really a response to modernity, and that modernity isn't solving things the way we expected in science fiction. It's actually perhaps making things worse. So that's my response. Ellen, do you want to take anything on that?
Yeah, I think everything that you said, really resounds with what I was going to say. Mm-hmm. So my answer is not going to be too different. I think that, throughout human history, spirituality was maybe one of the few ways that humans had to achieve sort of an ecstatic experience. And certainly, like, reflecting on their inner worlds, there's a lot of, mystery there that isn't in the real world, like in the physical world. When industrialization happened, now we're in unexplored territory with all of this technology, interconnectedness, things that humans have never experienced before. So I think a lot of people got caught up in the cycle of capitalism where, people were sold this idea that they'll be happy as long as they continue buying into the system. And we're 200 years into that, I think, at this point, and there's not a lot to show for it. I mean, yes, we have built up these great cities and we have all this cool stuff, but like Brian said, quality of life isn't that much better. Like, the experience that people have, I think they're starting to realize that materialism is spiritually and emotionally void. So it's not providing them with the joys and the pleasures that they are really seeking, that everyone looks for in life. So yeah, I feel like there's kind of this resurgence at the moment for spiritualism or spirituality because it's reactionary to the capitalist world that we live in.
What do you think about the ecological aspect? Like, why has that seemed to hit a fever pitch as late?
Well, probably because we're trashing the planet.
And it's observable now.
Yeah, and there's plenty of scientists speaking out about global warming and the coming floods and droughts and wildfires and all of these things that are happening because of human action. And, part of that is we have to give up materialism in order to allow the planet to heal. There's just no getting around that. We have to stop industry as it is. And I think maybe that's part of why people want to return back to the land. Another part of it is just getting out of the rat race. I mean, nobody loves this 9 to 5 Monday through Friday cycle. It's driving everyone a little crazy.
Right.
Just feeling like we never have time for ourselves. We don't have time to like just sit and be in our own heads. So being in nature is one of the few ways to really do that, to like be in an active meditative state. So I think that's part of it too.
Sure. Zach, what do you got? Or Penguin? Go for it.
Yeah. First of all, what you said again, I want to echo Ellen said. You really put it really well right there. I mean, I have very strong like differences, as anybody would understand, with sort of the idea of religion, and also the idea of like materialism to an extent. Like it really depends on what you mean. But when it comes to the idea that that progress, technology, what we call technology, technical progress and everything was going to be the solution for everything. I mean, like I said, I say this a lot. We have to put everything into context. Historically, that there was a swath of history, like recent history, past industrial revolution, post-industrial revolution, like second half of the 19th century, first half of the 20th century. I mean, going on actually through into the late 20th century, where there was technical progress being made at the rate and modernization, industrialization and stuff, societal transformation at the rate where I think for a period of time, I mean, it's what we really do call a revolution, where it did seem like at this rate and at this scale, like that was what's going to happen. If you look at futurism from that period of time, they really thought that they really thought the Jetsons was going to be real, where people would be flying around and flying, the stereotype of flying cars versus how technology actually. It's interesting to see how what technology they would not even be able to consider, like the workings of and the ramifications of that we do have now. That's probably way more transformative than a flying car would be, which is basically like a type of airplane. But could they even consider what a smartphone is or does, or like the entire network of everybody having a smartphone and having all of these apps that do pretty much an infinite combination of things? And I honestly don't think they could, even if they could understand, even if some people could talk, envision the basics of it, to actually being able to comprehend the implications of having this like global network of everybody being. I mean, we're not even able to wrap our minds around what this truly means. But yeah, the way things, there was a period of time where I think it really did almost made sense to basically see the trajectory of history just going to be nonstop technological development. And it certainly is. There's some mind-blowing technology being developed right now, but it's not at this revolutionary scale. And so going forward, we're going to still see the development of new technology, but it's not doing what it actually. I think there was a period of time where it actually was, and still we're still on the tail end of that, where it was. If you look on a global scale in all parts of the world, maybe in some of the less developed parts of the world, where it was just transforming people's quality of life rapidly upwards. And it's hard because it's several generations ago where a lot of that changed in the United States, and it was still relatively wealthy before then, but we've really eliminated, we've eliminated global like destitute poverty, and subsistence farming is starting to being transformed, and some of the lowest quality of life situations as education is being extended to basically every place on earth, interconnectivity, telecommunications, and like I said, this kind of abject poverty is being slowly eliminated, and people are being integrated into the global kind of consumerist world. I mean, which could have its negative implications on our end, where it's very mature. But I mean, it's certainly and I say this about a lot of things historically. Certainly a massive improvement for the people at the lowest end of the global scale. But where we are, we're not rapidly transforming our lifestyles at that pace that technological development isn't raising our standard of lives. It's stagnating. I don't think necessarily it's on that declining. I mean, we're very comfortable, well fed, well air conditioned, but our quality of life is very much stagnating and in many respects getting worse. Our psychological health, spiritual health, and everything is getting worse. And so the answer not being technology uh, makes us look in all sorts of directions. And I mean all sorts of directions. I mean, what's considered a spirituality or spiritual response or religion should be viewed very, very broadly. It doesn't have to be theological or mystical or anything like that. But many people are looking, in that direction and everything. And I have no problem what direction people kind of go into. I mean, I have obviously what I think is the correct answer for my professed faith. But beyond that, like, it's very interesting to see that people are intuitively grasping that technological progress and sort of not just material technology, but social technology, sort of kind of a progressive politic, isn't going to, at the end of the day, it just doesn't have the ingredients to necessarily and continue that progressive view of history. That this steady rising line of history, that there's much more to human existence. And I think like I said, we've just grown accustomed over the course of several generations to have that technologically led progress, and we're somewhat, but not totally disconnected from other means, because obviously, there's been plenty of back to the land and all sorts of spiritual revival movements interspersed here and there.
Penguin comes in with a banger again.
As
well
usual.
said, Penguin. Yeah. I agree mostly with what everyone said, but let me sort of lay something out here that might add to what everybody's been saying, and then I have a question. So, Penguin, you're right. The industrial society, and modernity, civilization, call it what you like, absolutely improved the standard of living for most of the people in the world, and allowed like the poor to gain luxury goods and required less labor to provide for their basic needs and all of these sorts of things. And sure, and I think at some point the sort of unspoken trade-off was that you put your 40 hours in at a job you hate for 40 years, and then you have a good living, and you traded off a great deal of freedom and autonomy, I think, that people previously had. Even they may not have had the same material goods that we have now, but they had a different sort of freedom than we have now. So they traded that off to go work in the factories and the offices, and they did that for material comfort, which I'm not downplaying. That made a whole lot of people's lives better than they were before. But eventually, and you could provide for yourself and your family and have a decent living doing that. However, and you could call this the just the progression of capitalism, or it could be due to the predatory class. This could be the nature of industrialization. I don't really have an answer for that, but eventually that material compensation became less and less and less. So now we're at a point where we have microplastics in our blood, and you're working just to make enough money to put gas in your car to go to work the following day.
Yeah.
And you hate your life, and all the stuff you buy is worse than the year before. And now you still don't have that spiritual or connection, or you don't have the connection with community. You don't have the freedom that you traded off, or somebody traded off generations ago, but you still have to work in these shitty factories, or it's offices now. Nobody works in a fucking factory anymore. under fluorescent tubes and just eating away at your soul for 40 years, and you could barely have anything to show for it. So I think the part of the reason we might be seeing, like, I don't know, a surge and reaching out for something but beyond materialism is because we're not being people are not being compensated materially as maybe they once were in, say, a couple decades, 3 decades before, when, you know, at least they could say, well, I never saw my kids grow up. I wasted my life in the factory, but at least we have a house and 2 cars and whatever, and my kids can go to a good school. Do you know what I mean? Where now you don't even get that now. You work enough to go to work the next day, and that's it for most people. And everyone fucking hates it and no one's happy. So I guess I'll wrap this up with like a question. So I've dabbled in reading Jacques Ellul. Are either of you familiar with Jacques Ellul?
I am.
No.
Yes.
Just from this podcast, yeah.
So Jacques Ellul was like who Ted Kaczynski drew a lot from.
Mhm.
So he makes the argument that this is actually the nature of industrialization. It can't go any other way. So the nature of industrialization is essentially a constant strive for efficiency above all else. So I like efficiency mainly because it allows me to labor less for the same result. But what industrialization is, it's efficiency mainly for the sake of efficiency or profit and that sort of thing. So technological advancement and industrialization will always lead to this point where society is just working to be more efficient, to work, you know, you become a cog in the machine essentially, and it can't go any other way. So do we think that this is like the natural end result of civilization and industrialization, or do we think that maybe under different circumstances this could have gone another way? Can we have technological advancement and some form of industrialization but still retain some sense of our own dignity and spirituality and deeper meaning, you know, to life and happiness, and do, you know, and it, you know, I don't want to get into anti-work too much, but people doing what they want to do or what makes them happy and still maintaining their subsistence, you know, is that possible, or is this just a natural progression of these things?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that first of all, I just want to say, in regards to the past few generations in the United States, particular, like, we did get used to a certain rising productivity, rising lifestyle, and everything, just because, like, the rest of the world, you know, they say like the rest of the world's industrial capacity was bombed out after World War II. So it's just like you're in that position, and obviously the U.S. is going to be top dog economically. So, you know, it's kind of sad that, like, I mean, it's obviously we ended up with this great quality of life and lifestyle and American dream and everything, but you gotta know it's fleeting, and nobody wants to give it up. But, like, it's one of those things, like, the world is not going to remain completely destroyed or undeveloped forever, and that that position of, like, economic king of the hill is going to go away. But, like, you can have obviously continued rising standards of living and maybe a certain very beneficial technical development going on that kind of lowers certain costs and helps us have a bit more fulfilling lives. But I think, more broadly than that, I think, yeah, like, to kind of going to what you were talking about, that we can continue to have we should continue to have a certain sort of progress and development. We could, or we should desire, or maybe even innately desire, a certain kind of continued progress. When you see, like, those graphs, you know, people point out the continuing rising productivity of the U.S. worker versus compensation, and then you get inflation and sometimes very high inflation, even eating away at that, so that the actual purchasing power is just so much lower. We're getting poorer and poorer basically, and less compensated every year. on average. But people should want a continuing development where we can continue to be wealthier in the sense that we're able to purchase more things or have more free time or have exactly have less of a, for example, eliminate using technology to eliminate commutes, to have more time to do any number of things, including being with your family, being the work from home, being integrated, not just in the middle of a pandemic, obviously, but all sorts of things that could increase our leisure time and increase our mobility, or like ability to manage our lives logistically, or our families, or everything, or things that can legitimately help us in a way that's not just a straight line material progress, that we can work less hours and still have a rising standard of living and a more fulfilling lives and everything. And I think like progress and technology could, in fact, I mean, the possibility exists of it being there to do that, for those things to happen. Like the technology exists, the resources theoretically exist, but people are demanding it and they don't know how to necessarily achieve it. I guess I think there's an innate desire that people are demanding it, but how do we achieve that in the paradigm that we are? I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah. Ellen, do you want to add anything in, or I can go first? Or
I guess I'll go first. That's fine.
Okay.
So just listening to what Sack and Penguin said, I think that like in the current paradigm that we live in, I don't know that there is an option for people to like continue working as they are and to become more spiritual, and like it just feels kind of mutually exclusive in a sense. Like if we wanted to reset our society in a sense, I think that would be really helpful in that regard. Like if we were able in some sense to only work on the things that we really wanted to make like passion projects, or if, for example, we all took turns working in like the town factory for like 10 hours a week because we knew that it would be helpful for our community. That kind of, I feel like that would make people happy. I don't know that there's a way that we can continue existing in this capitalist world where, the strong take advantage of the weak and the rich are always getting richer, but they're not like helping out those that are struggling beneath them. I think it's going to take an entire mindset and philosophy shift. And I think maybe that is going to be one of the benefits of the, if you want to call it like the spiritual awakening, the revolution that's happening. Just that people start to recognize the humanity in everyone around them, and that there is, value in supporting those around you, and there's value in protecting life, and people being more generous and kind and acting with their hearts first and not necessarily with profit motive, because that's what the world is geared towards now. Like the economy completely runs on, like you said, Zach, efficiency. And who doesn't love efficiency? I do.
Yeah, you're an engineer.
Right. But I think there comes a point, and we have surpassed the point where industry is efficient to this extent that it no longer considers the health and happiness of its workers, except where it's forced to. Like OSHA exists because people wouldn't go to work unless they had certain promises that they would go home from work in the same state of health as when they went in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something that businesses kind of have to kowtow to, like if they were allowed, like they were before OSHA existed, working conditions would be really unsafe. And that's just for efficiency's sake, just to make more money. And I think that there is no real incentive for industry as it is to care about its workers and to make people happier. So that's why I'm saying I think there has to be like an entire shift in philosophy and mindset of everyone to really like reset the way industry is if it's going to continue to exist at all in the future.
Yeah. I want to play off a couple things you said there, Ellen, as well, in that, like, the rich get richer. Here's the thing, like, is there something wrong with making money? No, there's nothing wrong with making money. I think one of the issues here is rich people, there's this belief in capitalism that, well, the money filters down, right? Like, the richer person and they get richer means they hire more people. This is not true. And also the rich person doesn't really generally, especially like, kind of the top 1% or 0.01%, they don't really put their money back into the community, right? Like,
no, they hang on to it.
No, right. And it's not like, and I'm not arguing necessarily for communism or anything here before anybody thinks that, but this is the reality, is that, when you make money, Ellen, say, you still go to, I don't know, cutting crew to get your hair cut, right? And or you go to the grocery store and get your groceries, the local grocery store or whatever. The money goes almost directly back.
Wait, that 80s band cuts hair?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I just died in your arms tonight.
Sorry,
was that Mr. Yeah. Anyway, that's great. Yeah. But that's the thing, is that the money that the rich keep getting richer with, or, that they keep accumulating, like, it doesn't actually go back into the system in any real meaningful way. And the argument would be that, oh no, it does. They hire people and they do this, but that leads to another thing. Do you want to say something on?
I just wanted to say, often rich people are also playing the system to their favor.
Yeah.
So that, the rules lean more towards in their favor for keeping their money and for hiding it away.
Oh, no. Yeah. Look, the rich all around the world, they're all socialists. Every fucking one of them. They're socialists. They're not capitalists. It's capitalist for us. It's socialism for them. I mean, that straight up.
Even Rothbard said you would not be able to find a billionaire today that did not acquire their wealth through the political means.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to continue on with the point is, okay, we've created more efficiency, right? More efficiency in the workplace. I mean, Ellen, you probably, as an engineer, you're encountering a lot of this stuff firsthand, when like a new system comes in that makes things easier or whatever. But here's the funny thing, right? Is you still have to work 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right. Now, all this efficiency and technological advancement should make you work, should allow you to work less.
Or should give me a raise.
Yeah, Or, yeah, see, there's lots of ways that this could go. For example, like, there's this big push, and I encountered this recently working with another company where, they went to a 4-day work week, right? Which you think is an improvement. I mean, and it's so funny because the 8-hour work week, the 8-hour work day, this is something, first off, created by anarchists, by the way, in Britain. But it sort of stopped there and never went and it's never evolved. Like, and now it's been the 40-hour work week so long that most people just think it's like nature, it's like a law of the universe or something, when there's no need for that. Anyway, I went to work for a company, and Ellen, you know how much hell this was for me. Where they did a 4-day work week, and you think, ooh, only working 4 days? That's great. I have 3 days off or something like this. The thing is, they don't want you to, it's not really less time. It's 10 hours a day, say, instead of 8 hours a day, but that's wiping out those entire days because you got to sleep. And if you want to be healthy, you're going to go hit the gym and you got to do these things. It's actually not an improvement. The improvement would be that we would want, and that I think a lot of people, including anarchists, or like especially ANCAPs, would expect capitalism to get you to, is that, no, it's a 4-day work week. You're even working less than 8 hours on those days, but you're getting paid like people did 10 years ago for a 40-hour work week, right? So that's kind of a raise, like you said.
Yeah, sure.
You're working less, but you're still making the same amount of money. That's what appeals to people about a 4-day work week, not the notion of working grueling hours. Because at the same time, we have the same research, or we have consecutive research, I guess you could say, or parallel research that says, yeah, you're lucky if you can get 3 good hours out of anybody, to work in a day. Okay, so then that means we should only have to work 3 hours. But the problem there is the asshats at the top think, well, then I'm only going to pay you for 3 hours. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. Like, I'll get the same work done for 3 hours, but we've created this system where things cost such and so much. We've still got to make that amount of money. Like, we have to make the same amount of money as a 40-hour work week. But that's not how things, ended up, right?
Yeah, it's all very cutthroat. Like everybody
Right.
knows that business is cutthroat, and
Right.
and to stay in business, you have to make more money than your competitor.
Right. Right.
But like, why?
Not
do
only
we
that, but you
want
have to make
that?
more profit than last quarter, or your
Yes.
shareholders are going to boot you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bingo. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Sek, you hit in another great point there. And that is, what does capitalism actually engender? It does not engender innovation, nor does it engender making the best. Capitalism simply is concerned with what's next. More growth, right? More. It is not about giving you the best. One of the most important things that I could ever share on my own show is that we humans can innovate past perfection. No one wants to accept that. Everybody thinks, no, the next thing has to be better. That there is no logical reason why that should be true. And in fact, there's every reason, every incentive for it not to be.
It's
So-
empirically
I
incorrect.
think you covered that, didn't you?
Yeah.
I think you covered that. One of you, I think it was you, Brian. You covered that when you said kind of that we're kind of we're trudging along in this existence where, I mean, this is slightly different, but where like every year the products are worse off, and every year this
Yes.
Things are getting worse. And one of the ways in which they get worse, I guess, is basically that we look back into the past, and you had these very robust, and we've discussed this, and there's a lot of stuff about like forced planned obsolescence and stuff like that. But even where it's not like obvious planned obsolescence, which I mean it often is something along those lines, but even when it's not, you get this idea of like we have innovated past the point, and then it becomes almost. And you see, I think this a lot with cars. I mean, there are some really good advances that have happened more recently with cars. I mean, just in terms of safety, but you kind of get this idea that we can. That's a really good example, obviously, because it's so much emphasis is put on the new models and new product design, new year after year. What's the next model going to look like? So that's actually a fantastic example where like it's just innovating just to innovate, and that's been like that actually for a long time. If you look at the history of the automotive industry, that it's just innovating for innovation's sake. And obviously you can look at certain classic vehicles and people think very, very fondly of those things. And it's kind of a shame that there was that Cash for Clunkers whole deal, because like, there's plenty of different vehicles that have come out over the past 50 plus years that people think very, very fondly of. And there's a reason for that. Unusually compared to most kind of like products, because they achieved a very high level of like, maybe there's pros and cons, but like they achieved features and they achieved a product that was very desirable and long lasting in something that came out decades ago.
Yeah,
you hit people driving old vehicles. Right.
And that keyword long lasting, I want to touch on that. And Ellen, this speaks to something you said as well. It's almost like people just feel it. There has to be this mind shift change, and they feel it. I'm reminded, speaking of science fiction authors, again, my dear lost friend, Harlan Ellison, he had a 42 Packard. This is a classic car. And he would always talk about how when he would drive it down the street, even in California, where everybody's got Lamborghinis and all this other crap, right? And I knew exactly what he was talking about when he would see it. And he's like, the kids would just, whenever he'd stop somewhere, kids would just run up to his car. Granted, this was 20, 30 years ago, but even then, that's more important. This was still 30 years ago. And his explanation was like, why were the kids so fascinated by his old Packard? And it's because everybody essentially recognizes there's just something in you that recognizes that something was built to last, that this was as good as it got, and it's something so much more special than everything else that was on the road. So yeah, I think there are some like certain innate feelings we have, and this probably speaks to a larger thing as well, that we're, like Ellen was saying, that there's so much around us, and we kind of all innately know it's all crap. Like it's all plastic garbage, nonsense. And we just keep accumulating more to try and we accumulate more plastic just to try and justify the existence of the initial bullshit that we bought in the first place. But something else, I want to add in here as well, because I think for a good while throughout the 20th century, boy, it did seem like there was just going to be this consistent, like we talked about, this consistent uphill or upward climb of technological progress and perhaps even social progress and so on. Another major, I don't want to say it's a problem, but a problem I'll call it a problem for the sake of the conversation that we have right now, is there is no Soviet Union. The US does not have some kind of competitor where we want to make better, and China's not even a competitor. In fact, China has better engineers than the US does. Okay. The idea that somehow China is like backwater workers or something is nonsense now. But the point is there's no one for even the US to want to compete against as far as making a better thing than. And I think we're kind of losing out on that. Not that I argue for existing in a second Cold War of any kind. I wouldn't dare do that. I'd rather live in the Stone Age than have a Cold War. But I think that that's something missing. And then the last two things I'm going to say on this, and these are going to be like my kind of middle of the road solutions on all this stuff, is that if we wanted to start solving this, and maybe like we talked about, maybe keep some of this, keep some of the capitalist creature comforts, as I call it. The two things. One is all government workers should use public transportation. Private individuals can use whatever the fuck they want. But it's actually, it seems like it's the opposite that the government is pushing for. The government wants private individuals all to have, not to own their own cars and to use buses and whatever public transportation. But I think public workers, public employees, officials, they should all be using public transportation, and everybody else again can do whatever they want. The other thing is that if the government came out yesterday and banned all advertising across the board, which, by the way, it did before the 1980s. And this is kind of an ironic thing for me to say, but I won't go into that irony. But if they banned all advertising, I think that would solve a lot of problems. Granted, it would create a bunch of others, and a lot of people would lose their jobs for sure. But how do you keep, this level of technology? You have to stop selling the lifestyles that don't actually exist. And that's all that advertising does. So I'm an anarchist. I'm not arguing for actual government action, but if people wanted to hear some kind of middle of the road solutions on all this right now, those would be the ones that'd be the direction I'd be looking at. Who wants to break out the pitchforks?
Oh, I'm taking away your anarchist card right now. We're ripping it up. Yeah. I got it right here. Gone.
Shit.
So my wife and I were with one of the kids. We're playing Monopoly one time. And so it occurred to us that if you're not an asshole, that game doesn't actually end and
right.
No one loses.
Right.
Which is the weirdest thing. So then I started thinking well, that's sort of like a microcosm for the current problems. The only way you win at Monopoly is being cutthroat. But if everybody is just fucking cool to each other, the game keeps going forever. It never ends. No one loses and everybody makes money. So it's easy to think about these things or make these things happen in a board game. It's much harder to do in real life, but I think the answer is, and I know I quote Karl Hess quite often, but it's to gain ownership over production again, to completely reimagine our relationship with production, to distribute it to the farthest point possible at the most local level, and just start doing that and start doing whatever it is that you love and see what happens from there. I think you're right. It's going to take a huge shift. And I don't necessarily think it needs to be philosophical, but I just think that people are at a point where they might realize it serves their self-interest to just find whatever it is that makes them happy and make a living doing that. And so I was just thinking about as you guys were talking, the planned obsolescence, the growth overall, the theft, and the ever increasing profits for the call them whatever you like, the capitalist class, the predator class, and then you sort of couple that with the collusion between the government and the capitalist class to make everything artificially scarce and more expensive all the time. And it's if you start looking around, it's how how much cost and how much labor is this adding to us? How much more, like, if you didn't have all this wealth being extracted from the capitalists, and you didn't have all this, directly, but also all this wealth being extracted from us by making cheap shit and making it more expensive,
Mhm.
and then you couple this with the government protecting their holdings and allowing them to extract more and more rents, and this gives them the upper hand in terms of negotiating with the workers. Obviously, all this starts adding up. It's not hard to imagine if all this didn't exist, we would have to work far less to just acquire our basic needs and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. We would have so much more fucking leisure time. I mean, if there's a utopia that exists, that's it, man. You'd have so much more leisure time to pursue whatever it is you want. And I like Alan's idea of, like, have the town factories for certain things, and everybody put direct, what they call that, direct production, no, production for direct consumption. Everybody takes a turn at the factory to provide things that the community needs or whatever, and everybody gets the mutual benefit for that. But if all these wealth extractions were eliminated, and we started producing things for ourselves, we would have so much more time, free time, to pursue, to, like you said, to get in your own head, to take a break and think about things for a second. And one thing I don't understand about these, listen, I'm what the Marxists would call a petite bourgeois. Okay, I'm a small business owner. I'm self-employed. Yeah, I don't like working for a boss. I don't like doing that. But I have employed people before, and when, and maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe I'm not cutthroat enough, or maybe I'm too nice of a fucking guy. I don't know. But when I do well, like, say we're doing a job, and one of my helpers, and we all hustle and we get this job done faster. That means I make more money, right? And when I make more money, I'm like, hey, here's a nice chunk. Hell of a job today. I'm doing good, you're doing good, everybody's doing good. We're all making money here. So if things are going well for me, I take care of the people that are working for me, because I know they hustled, and I appreciate that. And forget about all the moral or ethical anything. If somebody's hustling, working for me, I want to make sure they stick around. So I give them a chunk. I try to be a decent person and a decent boss and treat them how I want to be treated, because they will have more, I don't know, respect for me. They'll do it again in the future. Like, if you take care of the people that take care of you, it's mutually beneficial. So I don't understand, and maybe I'm missing something here, why even these capitalists wouldn't see this the same way as I do, even from a purely self-interested position. Like, I don't understand, where am I just a sucker? Is that it?
Well,
where's this disconnect?
yeah.
I don't know. I think has something to do with. I'm not going to say much, but I think it has something to do with central banking or something. I don't know. They all that money they print out pops up to corporations. But I'm no economist, so I would. You got to find out more about that from somebody else. But I honestly do think. No, I honestly do think. A big fan of the. I was, cheering there. I'm a big fan of the PBs, the petty bourgeois. Yeah, I think I like business. I like small businesses. I like investing money and getting profits. I love the profit motive. But yeah, I mean, I think that that you know, I mean, capitalism. Let's just put aside some of my other concerns with capitalism. Actually, that I haven't been really qualified to even share on the show yet. But I'm pretty much pro all that in the basic sense. I love to see the small business owner and how he kind of responds, because I think people in a market driven, basically quote unquote capitalist society, absent a lot of other kind of interventions and bigger things that go on, tend to do great. They tend to be like generous, charitable, and that's, treat your workers well, which was a totally self-interested, like basically decision. I mean, that's totally like what you always taught me, Sec. That's a market decision right there. That's purely a market decision. I mean, even helping out somebody that's down on the luck is basically, I mean, by I think your definition of market decision. So I think there are bigger forces, much bigger societal forces than the at the local or community or whatever level, or the basics, what's the word, skin deep level, that kind of push a lot of these things. And I think central banking is a very large part of all of it.
Yeah, I want to play off of that a little bit, in that I think a lot of these businesses, especially really long running ones, even families of wealth and all this, like, I mean, there are sociopaths in the world for sure. Ellen, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So there are like kind of almost born assholes out there for sure. And power attracts the corruptible. But at the same time, I do think a lot of these older companies and a lot of these, like, there have been loans taken out 100 years ago or more that still have to get paid off, right? So they have to keep making money, and honestly, to like just pay off the debt of the previous generation or whatever else. There's that. But there's a second part as well that I think is, wait, why aren't these people just treating others better? I think there is a gamble being played right now. And one of the best examples of this was by really one of the wealthiest people out there right now, and someone who has invested in a lot of the tech companies that have integrated into our lives. And that being a guy named Marc Andreessen of the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. Now, I'm not saying that Marc Andreessen is some great evil or some grand evil person. There are some rich people I'd probably argue that for. I'm not going to say that, but he is very honest and open, and he wrote a kind of a manifesto back in September of 2023, where he was basically saying, look, government and everybody else, get over it. Get rid of all of the legislation that's in the way of technological development, and everybody, yep, you're all part of a gigantic experiment. And what we're trying to do is we are trying to get to utopia. It might be 100 years from now, it might be 200 years from now, but think about your future generations, and you going through, speaking to the, people like quote unquote us, you people having to deal with getting irradiated or having to deal with, technology that's fucking with your head and depressing you, maybe even making you off yourself. You people having to do all of this, putting up with all of this. Look, you're going to make a paradise for future generations. I mean, he's basically making the old argument of, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, and we're the eggs. And while he was honest about it, I think that's what a lot of people think. They have this long-termism. In fact, there's a term for it. It's called TESCREAL. And that's kind of an acronym, and I can't even think of what all the terms mean. But the concept is TESCREAL. And that is that a lot, even like Jeff Bezos, you go down the list of these billionaires, and again, they're mostly pretty open about it. They are thinking super long-term, and that we have to go through these quote-unquote growing pains to get to that point. So I bring this up to say that, like, Sec, how do they not see what you see, and that you want to treat your people better? Because for them, it's not about people today. For them, it's about people 100, 200 years from now, or even 10,000 years from now. Jeff Bezos famously built that clock out in the middle of nowhere that is basically doing a 10,000 year countdown. And everybody's like, what the fuck is it counting down to? But this is all part of that, again, TESCREAL, where they're thinking very long term. They do want what's best for everybody, perhaps, and they think that people today having to deal with a ton of shit is worth it. I would argue no, it's not, but I think that might be hinting at, how do they not see this? How do they not want to be generous? Why are they shoring up all this money? That I don't know. That to me, that speaks to me as far as what their reasoning is, and honestly, maybe that's being a little optimist, because, most people would just come out with an Alex Jones flag and saying, oh, it's the NWO, they just want to control everything, blah, blah, blah. And maybe they do, but, they are being pretty open of, no, deal with it now. In the future, your future generations, everything's going to be better. I mean, Ellen, do you have anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to answer Sex's question directly and say, no, I don't think you're a sucker. I think you're doing the right thing for yourself, your business, your workers. And like one of the things that I feel is not acknowledged today in business that companies would do really good to acknowledge is that money is not the only way to show appreciation to your workers. Like there's plenty of other ways. Like when you say that you go onto a job site and you guys all like do a great job and make extra money and you distribute that amongst your workers, like according to whatever you think they deserve. I think Penguin described that as like generous, and in a sense it is, but that also implies a power dynamic. And like, why do you have more power in this situation than everybody else who is working with you? Is it because like you're the one that owns the business, you put in that initial work, and then who decides how much extra you deserve because of that? And like, if you just escalate that chain of logic to larger companies, say like the one that I work in, you have like the CEO and the president and all of the managers and supervisors. And then you get like the other little people that actually do the real physical work. And like, for some reason, they get paid way less than, the people up at the top of the pyramid. And who gets to decide that, And if we were, paid more, that certainly would make people feel better. There'd be a little more loyalty, like fealty to the leaders, because, okay, we feel like we're being recognized and seen for how hard we work and how much we put in to actually make the stuff that you guys talk about in your meetings all day happen. But there's other ways to do that too. Like, there's a system, I'm not going to say what it's called, but basically you can recognize colleagues for doing a great job on something. And then, you get rewards. You get to choose for yourself, like what you get in return.
Like in this system, other employees can actually give you certain points.
Yeah.
And then you can go and like into a store of sorts and you can get things from this. Have I got it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not even the employer paying you more. It's the employee. It's other fellow employees that are recognizing you. So, and that's not money necessarily. Right?
Yeah. I mean, you can translate it to that for sure.
Yeah. What do you got, Penguin?
Okay. I don't know. Call me intensely skeptical. Well, first of all, I mean, in person that, especially as somebody who also is like a small business owner, I mean, is a lot of sacrifice and a lot of investment and stuff goes into starting a business. I have no problem with hierarchies at all. I mean, that's certainly different ways of forming a business. I mean, I think any way of forming an enterprise or an organization is perfectly fine with me. And that's certainly one of them. The pros and cons exist. They should be able to freely compete. But when it comes to like that kind of thing, I mean, as someone who's just worked jobs for a long time and finally got out of that, with some pros and some cons, like, hey, they always wanted to recognize you with something other than cash. I take the cash 11 times out of 10. Because that's what when you work for a lot of companies. When you work for companies, they always try to do that. You say, "Oh, we'll give you a pizza party instead of giving you an extra $100." Yeah, pizza party. That's what it's. I'm hearing pizza party.
No,
I'm hearing we're going to give you a gift certificate for like a free drink out of the cafe. When I worked in a place with a Starbucks or whatever. Gives
your Applebee's gift card or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Some cheap thing that they probably got I'm sure they got for a lower than the cash value and everything. So I don't know. Call me skeptical. I take the cash.
I hear what you're saying. I guess my point is though that like there's something more valuable than money sometimes, and that is just like having those people who are higher on the hierarchy acknowledge, recognize, appreciate you, make you feel important as a person, because that's what makes employees really want to stay with the business. I think the money is great, but if you don't feel like you belong, if you don't feel like you're seen and appreciated, you're not going to want to stay for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm not like arguing for the company script. I always think that's
immediately what I thought of when you're you can get points that you can spend at the company store. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah,
no, let's not do that again. You can get Amazon bucks. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah, even though I would argue that Amazon credit,
That is what I've experienced in practice. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I would argue that Amazon credit is actually the most valuable money on the planet.
You're probably right about that.
You can literally get anything with that. I mean, I think it has more value than the US dollar, even though it's based on the US dollar. I've gotten so much shit for this in the cryptocurrency community because I'm like, no, like nothing is more valuable than Amazon credit, like not even Bitcoin. And anyway, that's why I've always argued that like Amazon never has to come out with a cryptocurrency. They never have to accept a cryptocurrency because the value of the company within itself, like it's such a Leviathan, you know, it's right there.
Dude, I hate how good Amazon is.
Yeah, right.
How convenient they are. I really do. I mean, there was a time where I was like, oh man, no, Bezos, can't support Bezos, but my God, I mean, they just the amount of things they've integrated into that company.
Yeah, well, it's true. And there's important things I think to bring up in this. And one is, you know, this is a company that does not turn a profit. And this is another thing where, okay, I think another reason, kind of starting off with what our conversation started off with, you know, why are people buying into spirituality and a lot of this other stuff? I mean, I think a lot of people are seeing either consciously or unconsciously the writing on the wall. Like, you know, we think about the music industry, right? We all love music as humans. It just seems to be something hardwired in us. Maybe not all of us, but most of us. Okay. You know, what is the largest platform for music distribution today? The largest platform is Spotify. Spotify, in all of the years of its existence, has never turned a profit. It is blowing away money, and it's been doing so for over a decade. And people don't understand this. You know, like you think it's so funny because they're like, oh yeah, I hate Spotify because the artists aren't getting paid and all this stuff. It's like Spotify's not getting paid. Like they're not, they cannot turn a profit. Now Amazon was a very similar situation, and I think a lot of companies expect to end up like Amazon because Amazon didn't turn a profit until after 20 years in business.
It was shortly after they started getting contracts with the CIA, by the way.
Oh yeah,
really turning a profit. Yeah,
totally. That might be a great segue. But but
I learned from the best, Brian.
Thank you. but this is the thing, you know. I don't think people understand this. That all this stuff that they think, oh, this has gotten so much cheaper, oh, this is so convenient, this is so much better. These are models that don't make money. You know, like I mean, they don't turn a profit. And sooner or later, something has to happen, like, or something has to break, or it does end up getting, you know, pushed onto. It trickles down, not in paying you more, but it trickles down in taking more from you, you know, as a consumer and so on. But yeah, I guess I'll end my. Oh no. Okay, one last thing I want to get in is, you know, this idea of hierarchies in business. I don't think we've had enough experimentation in business. For example, in fact, it's an interesting thing. I'm just going to end off with this tidbit, and if we want to move on to the CIA, we can. One of my favorite companies to talk about is called Valve. Valve is a video game company. They ended up creating a huge digital distribution service for video games called Steam. Most people know about that. And Valve has no internal hierarchy. Like there's the head guy, or people who consider the head guy Gabe Newell, but he's really just a mouthpiece. He did start the company, but that's, in his opinion, that's basically all he did. Now, the interesting thing about this, and the reason I bring it up, A, is they're wildly successful. I mean, they just print money by the day, basically. B, they have almost no innovation whatsoever. Like they are, in fact, the gamers complain about this. They're completely stagnant. Now, you could say that that's a problem, but interestingly, it's not. Like they're still making a ton of money. You know, they're still making a ton of money. Now, you could say that like the game developers that put their games on Steam, they're the ones that are doing the innovating. But it's an interesting point that if you do remove hierarchies, and I'm not saying necessarily that you don't have that you shouldn't have hierarchies in business or anything. I'm not necessarily going that direction. But again, we have very few companies we can point to like Valve, where they're a wild success. In fact, they're the biggest at what they do, you know, with millions and millions and millions of users. And the byproduct of, and it's arguable that the byproduct of their infrastructure is that they don't innovate past perfection, that maybe they hit perfection. Because what are people asking them to add in? They don't know. They just want some kind of change. They don't even know what it is. So it's an interesting, I think, looking at, just as a contrast in business, looking at Amazon and looking at Steam, two very successful companies run completely differently. And one being a complete oddball within the capitalist infrastructure we live in, and certainly in the West. I think there's things to expand on and to study within that. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of ANCAPs doing that, but I wish they would. Anyway, we can move on to other things if you want.
I think I just want to add on that I think it's totally depressing to me to imagine myself in the position of someone who makes like a great product and a profitable product too, and then just have some investors over my I've thought this about working for a company that's had like a board and everything, but I can't imagine making a product and kind of just going from like business fundamentals, just like business fundamentals, like basic things, quality control and retaining good employees and managers and blah blah blah, and really caring about the product. You started it from the smallest thing and it's become, for whatever reason, wildly successful, and you've really put like decades of your life into it. Let's say it's like a family-owned business or whatever, and whatever, it goes public or whatever the thing is, and then all of a sudden that you have to have like people breathing over your neck saying, innovate, do something new, and because I guess I don't know, I guess you can see with a lot of businesses, they're always just trying to do something new, throw some shit at the wall because they're required to. And I think that is, you're right. I just viscerally think that is kind of, depressing or kind of,
yeah, shocking. And it's interesting, right?
That's a great example, Valve. Yeah,
it's interesting that, again, they don't have to do that, and yet they still make money by the day. I mean, millions by the day.
Great product. Yeah.
All right, do we want to talk about drugs?
Well, okay, I was just going to say, I think we solved all the world's problems, but if anybody else has more to add, feel free. Otherwise, we can go on to something else.
I don't know that we solved anything. Just open up more questions.
Hey, listen, I solved it in my own mind, so that's all I need.
Okay.
Real quick before we go on to something else, okay, so for our audience and for you guys in our Discord, we have a channel where you can post questions for the hosts, and let me just show you the caliber of our audience. They're really asking, the real questions. Okay, so I'm gonna read you guys a question from our questions for the hosts, and it is: oatmeal, grits, or cream of wheat? Which do you guys prefer?
You have the most brilliant audience, man.
From a flavor perspective, I would say cream of wheat, but from like a dietary health perspective, oatmeal.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, I'm oatmeal all the way.
Oatmeal gang. All right.
Yeah, just because I mean, it's really it's such a protein packed affair. And anyway, go ahead, Penguin. Yeah.
Oatmeal supremacy. Okay, I get it. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we're two oatmeal. Penguin.
Oh, he's muted.
And he's gone.
What do you got, Zach?
I'm not a fan of any of them, but I would pick oatmeal out of those three. I used to occasionally enjoy oatmeal, but it's got to not just that plain stuff. It's got to have some kind of flavor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Gotta
dress it up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, when I have oatmeal, like I am putting so much peanut butter in it. Like, I mean, I'm just tossing
peanut butter.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it for me. Actually, Ellen, tell people about Teff.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was going to say we have our own recipe for oatmeal, and it includes like blueberries and chia seeds and cinnamon. It's really tasty, and walnuts.
Yeah.
But Teff is an alternative grain. It's really, really tiny. I guess the name actually comes from the fact that it's so small. It's like grains of sand. But it's delicious. It's got this savory flavor, low in gluten, so I can eat it. Mm-hmm. And it sources from Africa.
Right.
But it's really good. Great alternative breakfast cereal if you ever want to give it a try.
Yeah, great alternative to oatmeal. Mm-hmm. It's basically what we've switched to. So Teff, that's a thing.
TEFF.
Yeah. Penguin, are you back with us? I mean, regardless, it's Oatmeal Gang, and you're.
I'm here. My bad. Yeah, I had.
No, it's all right.
Are you gonna go against the grain?
I had I had
boo this man.
corn-based cereal
That's
there.
terrible. You should boo me for that. That's terrible. All right, sorry. Go ahead. Penguin. Oatmeal
I'm sorry.
grits.
I just stepped away. What?
Oatmeal grits or cream of wheat?
Oh man.
Asking the real questions.
I think I'm a fan of oatmeal because you can get it like everywhere, right?
Yeah.
You can get fruit in it. Yeah, but and grits can be good too. Like I think I would eat them sweet, although I've never had them the Italian way, which I don't know. I need to start cooking, but that's a whole nother story. They call it.
Nope.
Whoops, muted myself. No, anyways, I think you're going to hear me. Cream of wheat. Yeah, I gotta say, I really have a strong affection for cream of wheat. Growing up as a kid, I really like that stuff.
So you're going with cream of wheat? Is that your choice?
Yeah, I do think. Yeah, I think cream of wheat's my favorite. And I've actually had. Honestly, I've had cream. I've had a like North Indian kind of Pakistani version of that too, where it's kind of more congealed to a fudge now that I think about it. But I've had it the porridge way too, and I do like it. I do like it a lot. It's a great like cereal before there was like modern cereals too. But I've had it where it's done like more like a fudge and it's really sweet, with like little nuts and stuff in it. That's delicious too.
I'm just not a big fan of like the texture of like any of those things.
Same.
Just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
But okay.
Wait, do you like crunchy stuff?
I mean, yes. What do you mean?
I like soft. I like this. I don't know. I mean, you say you don't like the texture of that stuff. I do. I like soft. I like soft stuff. I'm a weird guy. I like soft, chewy stuff. So.
I mean, I like soft, chewy. I just don't like that, like, I don't know, like gruel kind of.
Yeah, it's like
I'm not.
It's like you're swallowing cum or something. I don't know. Wait, I would not know that. I'm sorry.
Oh, but it's like mashed potatoes.
It's like mashed potatoes.
Yeah, it's really.
See, mashed potatoes is the line, though. It's because mashed potatoes is a little bit thicker and it can be a little chunky, like.
Yeah.
But it's something about that really fine, like slop. I'm just not a fan.
Yeah. Well, if you get the steel cut oats and not like the quick cook ones, those are much firmer and bigger and chunkier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You can cook all these things in different ways. 100%.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, with mashed potatoes, I will swallow the gravy. I will. All right. Let's. Are we going to talk about drugs? Are we? Because
who knew that the oatmeal conversation would go this direction? But...
I prefer steel cut.
Okay, all right. I don't know what that means, but all right.
Cut from steel.
Oh, cut from steel. Oh, I like that. All right, that's good. Hard as iron. All right, so.
All right, so drugs. So I think this is actually possibly related to our previous conversation about like nature and spirituality and such, because I think there's simultaneously like I don't know if it's a resurgence or something because they've always been there, but there's growing popularity in the use of psychedelics, and it's turning it into like a weird commodity fucking business thing. But so this is becoming more and more popular now. Just from listening to the two of you, I'm gonna venture to and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that Brian, you're not a giant fan of drugs. Ellen, you might have dabbled a little bit here years ago.
Oh, you can correct him, Ellen, if you want.
Yeah. So Brian is not a fan of drugs at all, and I am.
Is that
what I said? I was in the past.
Well, I'm just gonna say, like you said, dabbled.
I did a lot of drugs.
Ellen's done a lot of drugs.
Like, I stopped when I started college because you can't really be an engineer and continue with that. But,
I mean, not with that attitude. Okay, so myself also, I've done a lot of drugs, mostly like psychedelics and party drugs. Okay, a little bit of cocaine and stuff, a lot of cannabis, and what else? think that's about it. A lot of ecstasy, a lot of psychedelics and psilocybin, some ketamine, that kind of stuff, which is why I can't remember a fucking thing. So, actually, I was just having this conversation the other day. I'm like, it might not be the drugs. I also took like a number of hits in the head when I was younger too. So probably,
yeah,
it might be that actually over the drugs, because I don't really do drugs. Well, what is fucking drugs? I don't do what they call food, and caffeine is a drug as well. Well, I don't do what they call illicit drugs very much now. I dabble. Sometimes I'll take a little bit of cannabis oil if I can't sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a time when when I was like 15 or 16, I thought that if I took enough psilocybin regularly, that I would be able to transcend my physical body and become a ball of pure energy.
You were tripping way too much.
Why? That's what I mean. Thank you. I was taking way too fucking much, and that didn't happen. But I used to make the joke like, "Oh, I didn't become a ball of pure energy, but I could never remember where the fuck I put my keys." So there is that. I got that going for me. So anyway, yeah, I took way too fucking much, way too much. But here's the thing, Brian. I know you're not a fan of these sorts of things, but I know some people might think that you're being like sort of judgmental against psychedelics. I never got that vibe from you. It just seemed like it was just not your jam,
Right.
But what role do you think psychedelics has in I don't know, spiritual growth or even mental health, sort of growth, the shadow work? I mean, I remember, back in the day, drugs really helped me a lot. Like it caused me some problems, sure, but it helped me through some fucking shit years ago. So I guess, it was, worth it in some sense. Like drugs were somewhat of a success story,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned a lot about how to start a business really young from selling drugs when I was a teenager. So but it helped me with, like, I mean, if you want to do some shadow work, mushrooms are gonna they're gonna do it. You're gonna do it whether you like it or not, if you take some mushrooms in certain states of mind. But I'm rambling. But what role, if any, do you think psychedelics or drugs more broadly have in human liberation or mental health growth or spiritual growth, anything of the sort, if any?
Sure. So I am fully confident in saying that psychedelics have been a part of religion, at the very least. And I would put a differentiation slightly between spirituality and religion. Just that religion would be something more organized, spirituality would be something more individually explored and expressed. It's always been a part of it. It's always been there, for good or ill, and it's like anything else, right? Like it depends on where the person takes it more so perhaps than the thing itself being having a judgment of good or bad. You're totally right. I don't judge anybody for it. I'm fully supportive of it. Fully supportive might be strong, but like I'm fully supportive of people doing whatever the hell they want. Bottom line. I think that there have been many occasions where, and you can read this, where even quote unquote prophets, or shall we say spiritual leaders, gurus, whatever, and I'm talking about ancient ones, where they would talk about going to a cave a lot of times, and that they would write in the cave. I think that was them inadvertently huffing cave gases, to where they had a psychedelic experience. They just didn't know it, so even if they didn't realize it or, understand what was going on, they still had these experiences, again, inadvertently. So I guess what I'm saying is, and well, let me also say, it really can be helpful. I have heard the countless stories. I'm going to let Ellen take this, where these, psychedelics have been very liberating for the individual. I might have concerns more when it goes outside of the individual and it becomes more of a mass thing. That can get kind of, I think, kind of strange, but maybe not. But I firmly believe that it can be a very helpful thing. However, I caveat that with it's not a necessary thing. And I would also add in that I think if there is some kind of grand benefit from it, that it's something that one should be able to integrate through their life. Maybe not all the time, but more of the time. I don't know if I'm explaining that super well, but Ellen, I mean, so like you said, you don't really dabble much anymore. But you had an incredible positive experience with psychedelics. Do you want to share? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can talk about that some. So when I was younger, I went through a lot of trauma in my childhood. Even my first relationship was really traumatic and abusive. I was 19 years old coming out of all this war of shit, and I was completely emotionally inept. I did MDMA for the first time, and it felt like it advanced my emotional awareness and emotional intelligence by years. Just in one night of doing MDMA with a friend in a quiet setting where we could just talk, it was like therapy on speed, I just grew and advanced so much in that one night.
Go ahead.
And I feel like that's just kind of the pattern. Every time I did something psychedelic, like MDMA, acid, mushrooms, the majority of the time I had personal breakthroughs that I just would not have pushed myself to make in my everyday life without those substances.
Yeah, so I want to add in, if you don't mind me sharing, about about you. It won't be anything personal necessarily, but before you did MDMA, you would say you kind of you were like this really hyper logical, almost a Rand bot, right? Like
sure,
and not really emotionally in touch, which is very hard, I think, for most people to believe when they know you, because you're so so open and so empathetic and all of those
Well, I
things.
didn't have that real sense of empathy before.
Right, exactly. Which is a key thing, I think, to connecting with other humans, and having real happiness.
Or should I say I had that sense of empathy, but it kind of been beaten to the background?
Yeah, which happens sadly to many children.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure, many young people. And so, but then you had that one night, you took MDMA and suddenly boom. And it's almost like the emotional floodgates opened on you. Am I describing this accurately?
Yeah, pretty much. I felt like a great sense of relief of just being able to talk about these things, which up until that point had kind of been just shoved down in my psyche.
Right.
And during that time period, I was smoking a lot of weed too. Marijuana was almost a daily thing for me for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that actually emotionally hindered me more than anything.
Interesting.
It certainly helped to calm me down in some respects, but it was leading me to stagnate in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt a lot better when I dropped that. I still take CBD. That's the non-psychedelic component of marijuana, or the hemp plant, technically.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the THC component of weed was really making me spiral into depression.
So I want to go back to that, but real quick. So that breakthrough, do you think that would have happened without MDMA? Could it have happened without MDMA?
It's hard to say. I mean, if we look back through history and say well, what if, who knows what could have happened, but probably not.
Probably not. Powerful. Sek, you got any questions on this? On also is on the the depressive aspects perhaps of marijuana? I thought that was interesting. What do you got?
So when you say, okay, so I used to be a huge pothead too, and then I quit for a long time, and then I've tried it a little bit here and there, and the past few years maybe, and I don't like it now, and I don't know what that is.
Interesting.
But same for me, it's not a depressive thing for me. I have a problem with overthinking. My brain won't shut the fuck up.
Yes, same.
So so it used to be that the weed would sort of quiet that, I could fucking relax. But now it cranks that up to 11, and my brain won't shut like if I smoke a little bit of weed, my brain really I can't sleep. My brain will not shut off. It just goes into overdrive. And it's not really like a lot of people get paranoia or anxiety or from it. It's not really. I'm not anxious. My brain just won't shut up. It won't keep. It just goes into it's like a fucking circus in there. So I can't do cannabis for that reason. I do notice that if I take like a little bit of drop of oil, I don't really get high, but it lets me. It assists in my sleep. Or in going to sleep, which I have trouble with sometimes. But other than anything, any more than that, and it's not good for me mentally now, like it was. Is that something similar to what you got going on, Ellen?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it did make me overthink a lot, but I think it also led me to being lazy in a lot of ways. And that calmness, that quiet, it was every day. So I wasn't thinking about things in the right frame of mind. And I think I was starting to act in ways that were kind of destructive. So that's part of the reason that I gave it up as well, because it was not beneficial for my personal development.
That's interesting. I mean, a lot of, my friends who are, other friends who I've talked to about it. Some of these people are like, I guess what you would call either high powered or high stress individuals. And they will always describe taking weed as just like taking the edge off. And basically they feel, I mean, when I hear them talk about it,
that's
I feel
what CBD does for me.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So when I hear them talk about it, I feel like they're saying, yeah, I'm in this rat race. I can't get off the wheel. And so I just need something to like turn my brain off for a little while, or I don't know, whatever it is, relax them for a little while. But like when I hear that myself, I feel like, the drug shouldn't be necessary, right? Like the problem is
pushing yourself so hard that you need uppers and downers.
Yeah.
Function. Right,
exactly. And so, and again, these are and these are good people. Like they're genuinely good people. It's just interesting. Like I don't feel like the negative conversation, perhaps, and I don't, if I'm saying this, if I'm over speaking this or overstating this as being negative, but like the kind of the downsides of marijuana, I don't hear this conversation much, so I'm intrigued by that. Does anyone have something they want to add? Penguin, what do you got? No? Okay.
No, sorry, I was unmuted and I muted myself. I think that, I had similar experiences in the past when I dabbled around with things. But yeah, I think it's really interesting that you're kind of sharing these anecdotes, these kind of experiences. I'm trying to think of a different word than experiences, but like these things you've noticed over different periods of time. But yeah, I think anything that we can. I've always been an advocate of. Well, I'll start with saying that I'm not in favor of most what you would call recreationally, like strictly recreational drug use. And but like within that, plain and simple, I'm not for it at all. But I'm very open to interpreting that very loosely, if that makes any sense. And I think that's different than saying that I just very loosely think that I'm against recreational drug use. I do think that any kind of benefit you can get out of consuming any sorts of naturally occurring substances is defensible, or potentially or generally just defensible. You can make bad decisions. People can weigh the pros and cons of something poorly and all the time. That's fine. But anytime you can get or even extract some useful substances, like for example, famously with CBD and THC, where people don't. Regardless of what you think about THC, it's like you don't always want the effects of dosing with THC, but you might want the effects of CBD, and we've been able to study that over time, maybe at a slower rate than what otherwise would have happened, and to isolate the effects of CBD. And I think that's pretty easily understood because of the receptors and whatnot. I'm really no expert there, but even I know somebody who has ended up making a career off of using psychedelics for like some sort of therapeutic purposes. And I don't know much about it. I knew a little bit. I talked to him about it a long time ago, and he was just started trying to get into the field, and he seemed to have become very successful in actually doing that and build a career off of that. So good for that guy. Probably should reconnect with him sometime on that. But that's a great idea, and that's fine. And I, it's not that I think you need you need or don't need state action to police that or kind of create a standard around that. But I think there should be, ethically speaking, there should be some sort of standard that these things are powerful and very useful, and these things shouldn't be, they should be gate kept, and it doesn't necessarily mean by a policing authority or something. But I mean, I think this should be.
So talk about the priesthood
for responsible use.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, one second on that. Yeah. So I agree. I think that having all these things be illegal obviously creates most of the problems with it, because if they could just be more openly studied, and some of these are ibogaine and some others, were and MDMA even, there are certain university programs where they do get studied, and certainly around the world they get studied more openly, where they're treated with a little more openness, shall we say. And that's really the way to solve this. Or, well, we didn't even talk about what the problem was, or if there even is a problem. But I think that's just naturally, that's a good thing to have, is to just have more knowledge around it. And part of the reason that I think perhaps these can be used for nefarious means and not just for their potential positives is because the information around them, the reality around them, the amount of the knowledge around them is either non-existent or controlled by authorities, which could lead us into the CIA. But Ellen, what were you going to ask?
I was asking you to talk more about the priesthood, because like Zach's original question was, how have psychedelic drugs been used in the past? And you recommended a book to me, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, where they talk about psychedelic mushrooms and their use and their role in religion for thousands of years. And those were, in a sense, sort of gatekept by the priesthood.
Yes.
So if you would just talk about that a little.
Sure. Well, it's kind of it's no pun intended, symptomatic. Like it's the same thing. It's like the government controlling it. Throughout time, I think there was a priesthood, a very specific train of thought that existed for a very long time that was considered the mushroom this holy plant. But these were, it wasn't knowledge that was spread to everybody. It was only kept by this specific priesthood, and generally, and used by it.
And it was how they were able to achieve a godlike consciousness.
Yes, this is true. So it's Mushroom and the Cross. It's a book by John Allegro. It's a very controversial book, but it's not controversial for the reasons people think it's controversial. It's controversial more because it said Jesus didn't exist. The rest of the history explored in the book is not controversial. Like, it's actually very good. I mean, he plays fast and loose with interpretations of some words, but by and large, it's a phenomenal read. And you do see this train of thought of kind of a secret priesthood that existed through many religions, not just Judaism or Christianity, that engaged in the use of mushrooms.
And they would prepare before they took these mushrooms. They had this whole ceremony that they would go through where there was fasting.
Yes.
And they would eat certain foods and drink certain liquids. And
for the most potent effect.
Yeah, they would be prepared to engage with that God consciousness.
Yes. Yeah. This was considered the way to become, or this is, apotheosis, right? This was the way to connect with God, or even
to the source.
To the source, to become it. Yeah, I mean that's there, and in fact, it's so there. I don't think it's arguable. Like, and even the greatest within not just Christianity, I think it's inarguable, but even the greatest within Judaism, Rabbi Akiva, arguably the greatest rabbi ever, 2,000 years ago. It seems pretty clear that, but his story ends in tragedy, that he consumed it, went and joined the Bar Kokhba revolt against the Roman Empire and died. But they talk about, and there's even other points within the Tanakh where they talk about like these warriors who could kill 400 people, like in one battle. It's like, how the hell did that happen? And we have historical records of what the Bar Kokhba revolt was like. And, they said that the Jews fought like madmen, and they killed lots of Romans. They weren't going to win, but they certainly they weren't losing comparatively either in this sense. And that came down to the fact they were taking psychedelics, and they basically were super soldiers from it. They were madmen. Like, they didn't care about their life, and they were just hacking away, and going nuts. And clearly there was historical precedent even before that for that. Do you have do you have a question on that?
No, I just wanted to hear you talk about the priesthood a little bit and how they gate kept the psychedelics.
Yeah.
Or used it to their advantage.
Used it to their advantage. Yeah. I mean, and they really, and they did. I mean, I would argue, I think Akiva lost his mind in more ways than one. Sure, he went and he thought somebody, this certain person at the time was the Messiah. It wasn't Jesus. It's a different character. And I could argue that I think psychedelics duped him, like made him think something that he normally is perhaps, I don't like to use this term, but I'll say it, his rational mind or his mind at rest. How about that? It caused him to, to engage in that. It caused him to go to war when he should know better. He was the greatest of mystics in his day.
Yeah, that's something really fascinating about psychedelics, is that they can convince you that certain things are true that in a normal state of mind you wouldn't believe at all. Like Sex saying that he thought he was going to turn into a ball of energy. Yeah, that seems pretty convincing. Or there were times where I genuinely believed I had telepathic abilities.
Sure.
But there's no proof of that whatsoever.
So, quick anecdote.
Yeah.
Several times, maybe half a dozen, maybe a dozen times, there have been a group of us, and we were convinced ourselves that we were speaking telepathically.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on mushrooms. Probably mushrooms. And here's the problem with this sort of thing is, were we just talking out loud and we didn't realize that like our mouths were moving? Or like we kind of forgot that noise was coming out of our mouth? I don't know. Or were we really fucking communicating telepathically, and the psychedelics open up some part of our brain? I don't know. That's the problem, is you don't really know when you're just kids having fun, without some sort of outside observer, you have no idea. But there's been a lot of weird things like that have happened that you can chalk up to, we were just tripping balls, but or maybe it was something else. I don't know.
Well, if I could, I'll take a quick roundtable here on this, and just a quick yes or no. And I'll start off just so everybody else can feel comfortable. I want to ask, do you believe that telepathy or psionic abilities, are possible, like that humans do have those? I'll answer quickly with yes. I think that is possible, and it doesn't have to be drugs or not, just a yes or no. Ellen, what do you think? Telepathy possible?
Yes, I think it's possible.
Okay, Sec.
Yes, I think it's possible.
Penguin, you want to stick your neck out on this one?
Pass. I don't want to. I don't know one way or another. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to stick my. I don't want to stick my head out one way or another. Right. That one could be. Right. Could be.
Great. Okay. I love the pass.
So it's not a definite no.
Yeah. So you're saying there's a chance. All right.
Guys, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So right. So it's possible that it awakened those latent abilities, perhaps. Or like Sex said, it was, maybe they just didn't realize that they were all really talking verbally, that they sound waves were being produced. And I'll just end off on the Rabbi Akiva point here, just with somewhat of I guess what could be considered a positive, in that, so Rabbi Akiva couldn't really read. He never read Torah. He didn't do any of that stuff until he was older than 40. He was just a guy who just farmed, whatever, just did his shit and was nobody, but how does somebody who's a nobody at 40 suddenly turn into what's considered the greatest rabbi in history? I think there's a very good chance that he got into the mushroom cult fast somehow. And maybe it's because his wife was wealthy, which she was, which is why he was able to go off and learn Torah when he wanted to. So he had the kind of the means. He was part of perhaps, the upper echelons, as it were, even though he was such a simple person. And then inside of a year, suddenly he's the most quoted rabbi in history. And that could be due to, psychedelics breaking through all of those walls and advancing him that quickly. So I'm open to that, right? That it was actually, in some way, it was a positive thing for him. But I would argue again that it ended very bad, and it's because he took it too far. So like maybe it can be a good starting off point, but it's not the end game. It's not something to continue rocking with. In fact, I could even believe a conspiracy where the Romans even would have introduced psychedelics, would have had some idea of it, and drove the rebellious Jews nuts, and injected, drugs into this community.
That sounds a lot like the CIA.
Well, right.
Sounds a lot like that.
Yeah, it's a very old playbook. And we know, in my opinion, the Romans had been trying to quash the pesky Jews for centuries, for a very long time. There's great books like Creating Christ, where the argument is that Caesar created the Christian religion, like that Jesus never existed, and that he created this religion, and he created it to pacify Jewish rebels. And so, maybe it was just the quote unquote logical conclusion or extension of that. It's like, okay, yep, we've pacified them, but damn it, they're still being rebellious. Time to give them the drugs. And the funny thing is, today we have modern corollary, right? Like we have the CIA, I think we know, has done this sort of thing. And there's the book that you read recently, Ellen, and that I read long ago, Drugs as Weapons Against Us by John Potash, where he very much argues that the CIA has used psychedelics, marijuana, all kinds of drugs to quell rebellions, even peaceful ones that aren't even, ones that just are a danger to the status quo in whatever way that they are a danger. Would you say that this occurred, Ellen?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of proof that like the CIA and FBI have done this. Obviously the most talked about scenario is MK Ultra, but there's plenty of others. Like the government use of psychedelics has gone back, even before the 60s, and continuing on all the way into modern history.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's just a lot of money and effort concentrated on studying, like, how do people's brains change when they're using these psychedelics? And the purpose of that study was not so that people could have this like emotional catharsis or breakthroughs on a personal level. It was so that they could manipulate people.
Right.
Because, people are much easier to manipulate when they are in an altered state of consciousness.
Right. Sek, what do you got? So we talked about this on a Sovereign Tech X episode, and I know, Sek, you had questions.
Well, no, it's well, I will just say I am in the drug war on the side of drugs mostly.
Right on.
Yes.
So when we were young trippers, this was already common knowledge that the CIA had been flooding, Haight-Ashbury and dead shows. And Ken Kesey wrote about how he knew all of his acid was coming from the CIA. And they're just like, well, that's fucking weird. I guess we'll take it though, so. So, this was pretty common knowledge amongst like I don't know, a certain variety of like counterculture, us as kids, like tripping balls, but we're, we're into like various weird fringe topics and conspiracy, and this was pretty well known. But so the counter argument amongst like psychonauts was that, oh yeah, the CIA, they thought they could control people's minds, but what they actually accidentally did was they started the peace movement and all these various fringe countercultures in the 60s by accident, and then they really stepped on their own tail there doing that. But they let a cat out of the bag that they shouldn't have. That works against the CIA's own interest. So the older I get, and the more I think about these things, and after years of self-reflection, also, I'm not entirely sold on that as much as I used to be. I mean, I'm still for the use of psychedelics and such, but it's possible that the CIA achieved, more or less exactly what they were, looking for.
So can I ask you a question about this?
Sure.
So, like, from your perspective, what happened to the peace movement? Was it a success or a failure? And like, if so, if it was a failure, why do you think that was?
So it's a common narrative that is accepted is that the Vietnam War was stopped by the peace movement and protests and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of that, the peace movement, came from the counterculture, which was using a lot of psychedelics and cannabis at the time. I used to believe that as well, but listen, I was at the protests in Washington D.C. before, in the lead up to the Iraq War, and there was millions of people there, probably more than there were during the war in Vietnam. And we didn't stop the Iraq War. So I started thinking about what was different. Why did the protests stop the Vietnam War, but we couldn't stop the invasion of Iraq? And the question is, I think the protest and the peace movement was largely irrelevant. I think a lot of the reason the Vietnam War stopped was just mainly because their own troops were sort of mutinying against officers. I mean, there was, soldiers were throwing grenades into their officer's tent because they're like, no, you're not sending us out there to die in this jungle. And I think in order to prevent a much larger, what do you call it? Besmirching the image of the military, they sort of dialed back or it left Vietnam. And I think that and sort of economics was the actual reason for the war in Vietnam. I think the peace movement did very little.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
I don't think protesting has, at best, you can sort of shift things along the edges or the fringes marginally, but I don't think mass protest has much to do with policy. So
agreed. Yeah,
it's possible that psychedelics, so like socialist revolutionaries at the time in the 50s and 60s would say that the peace movement and psychedelics, and the tune in, turn on, dropped out, just caused people to be like, kumbaya drum circles when they should have been, joining the vanguard and arming for the revolution. And it may turn all these people into like hippie pacifists. And that sort of, that was the goal of the CIA, was to take the teeth out of these people and turn them into, hippies and beads and VW buses and just stoned out drug users who couldn't really accomplish anything. Now, I won't go so far as to say like that's the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, but because I know from personal experience, like just how enlightening psychedelics can be, and you know, I have seen that I've seen both sides of this, you know, like so. To me, I think there's more truth to the CIA being success, or this being the outcome the CIA was going for than not. I'll put it that way.
Do you have a thought on that, Ellen?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point of my question, I think, was to, tease out like where that landed with USEC. But I kind of am of the same opinion that, you know, psychedelics, while they do have these great therapeutic benefits, and, it's always going to be true, I think, with moderation and with adequate dosing, like, yes, they can be very beneficial. But there's also the people who are going to use psychedelics more often or with larger doses, people that are just trying to escape reality. And that's what they do. And they are not able to enact any of their great ideas or whatever because they're just stoned or, tripping or whatever. And I think that was kind of the CIA's goal, was some of, introducing drugs to the market.
Let me push back on that a little.
Yeah.
Okay, so now these are conclusions that I didn't realize at the time, that I came to after self-reflection decades later. Okay, right. So in the beginning of I had a very similar journey to you. I had a lot of childhood trauma. I grew up in a very abusive household. I was a very depressed and angry young teenager. So I started dabbling in drugs, including psychedelics, but other drugs too, as a, just a party with my friends. And looking back now, there's a lot of those drugs were used as an escape to numb the, pain or to. But here's the thing, and then I sort of like realized that I got into philosophy and psychology and various other things, fucking Alan Watts and all this kind of stuff. And so I started using psychedelics more and more. I used to meditate a lot with psychedelics. I used to take a lot of psychedelics and read philosophy, and it really helped me think about things in different ways. Here's the thing. If people often, and I'm guilty of this myself, people will tend to belittle drug use when used as an escape, and sort of are more proponents of using drugs to enhance your mind or work through various mental issues and this. But if I didn't have those moments, like or those nights when you're taking Molly or mushrooms with your friends and you're just having a good time, that escape is like what I excuse me, what I needed personally then was it gave me that space from my trauma, to just have connection with humans and have a good time and laugh. I hadn't laughed in a long time before then, and it gave me like escape is sometimes what you need, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, sure, you should do the proper work and that will come, but sometimes you just need to fucking party and get fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm saying that
totally
this is also good too. Like, it's not, we shouldn't like it's very common now that psychedelics are becoming popular among therapeutics. It's like, well, you should use these in a proper setting, and you should use these only in these positive ways. Well, like, no, sometimes just getting fucked up with your friends is good too. Like, fun is okay. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes what your brain needs is escape and fun and fucking, just tripping balls with your friends and laughing until your fucking stomach and your cheeks hurt. You know what I mean? Like, yes, you are just using that as an escape from your trauma, but sometimes you just need a little space between your trauma and fucking you. You know what I mean? Like that's also fucking therapy. Sorry.
What do you
Yeah,
think of
yeah.
that, Ellen?
I'm totally supportive of, taking that time as you need it. And there's nothing wrong with, escaping from the terrible reality that we sometimes live in.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I think there comes a point where escapism does become destructive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like you said, you can use it for escapism, but then, you still have to support your family or whatever. So you can't always be escaping.
Sure. Yeah. I know we're going to have to wrap up soon. So I want to add something in to this, in that I love the conversation about the peace movement. Like, I think that was such a salient question to ask, because it's kind of the largest scale example we have, I think, of what effects these things have, with psychedelics, whatever else, that we can kind of point at historically. And I think a big problem of what actually happened is I don't know exactly that the psychedelics destroyed that movement, right? I kind of got the sense that we all agreed that it failed, like the peace movement failed, and like the hippies running off, checking out, like that didn't do anything.
Yeah, if what's like is true, that like the millions of people protesting the Iraq war didn't stop war, like
Right.
Clearly the government just doesn't give a fuck what we think.
Yeah, right. So, like as far as the hippies running off and doing their communes and all this stuff, what I think actually what ended up the problem that happened there, and what put an end to those, because those might have been, and there are some that are actually still around, right? We're aware of this. There's the one that like built the boat or whatever. I can't think of the names of a lot of these things, but I think what happened in a lot of these within kind of the hippie community was there was this amazing breakthrough, awakening, perhaps we could use that term, that was through the use of psychedelics that was happening. But the problem was, and they would go off and they break off into little communities, which I think is a fine and dandy thing to do. But the problem that would happen is you'd get either the sociopaths or you'd get the more controlling people who would come into that. And after you've had this amazing emotional breakthrough, especially after American culture of the 40s and 50s, which was its own problem, I think because people had these emotional breakthroughs, but they didn't actually have the knowledge, like the therapeutic knowledge that comes with studying it over a longer term, because it was so flash, so quick, that it was self-destructive, not necessarily because of the drugs, but because of the individuals that came into these communities, that came into these groups, that took advantage of everybody in this new awareness, that they weren't prepared to handle. And so I'm bringing this up to suggest that, okay, yes, psychedelics can be helpful, but, like Aristarchus said, there's no royal road to geometry. Okay, like it can be a kickstart, but there's still a ton of work that has to get done. Like for the individual, it's not something that in and of itself is the gateway to grander enlightenment. It needs more, and that more has to be taking the time, has to be the long work, on the self. Otherwise, you're a newfound babe, and you're just waiting to get taken advantage of. Whether it's the CIA, just some, controlling asshole that walks in, or whatever. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Like I said, I know we got to wrap up here shortly, but.
Yeah, I guess it just comes down to like you have to be the one in control of your own mental journey and spiritual journey. You have to be at the helm and be very intentional about what you're doing and know exactly what you're doing. I will say, like, there is definitely can be bad actors that also use fucking psychedelics, and just because somebody uses psychedelics doesn't mean they're some sort of like enlightened individual or is emotionally and mentally mature, I guess. my father is a prime example of that. Like, he was the most manipulative and abusive asshole you could think of, and he did smoke cannabis on a regular basis and dropped acid on a regular basis, and that made it worse. So, like, if you're a manipulative, skeezy person, I think that if you're not doing the self-reflection and you don't have the emotional maturity, psychedelics is going to make that worse.
Yeah,
and then you're going to get sucked into weird, like, cult like guru situations where someone else is at the helm and you're not the one driving this ship anymore. It has to be you in control of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a great point to bring up, because I mean, it's just as true. Well, it's true for many things, but like, it's just like, okay, so somebody's a libertarian. That doesn't mean they're a good person. That doesn't mean they're virtuous. That doesn't mean that they're, okay, great. They recognize that government authority is shit. Wow. Like, that doesn't say anything else really about the person at the end of the day. That doesn't keep them from being a dick. That doesn't keep them from being manipulative. It doesn't keep them from all kinds of things. Ellen, what do you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because you can always be selective with how you apply that. Like,
yeah, right.
Oh yeah, I'm a libertarian. I respect, personal property and privacy and all of these things. But then, still violate this one specific person's personal space or their privacy or, their boundaries or whatever.
Yeah.
It's something that I think for sociopaths, it's easy to justify away.
Mm-hmm. Penguin, what do you got?
Yeah, when just back to the general discussion of the psychedelics and everything, I guess it seemed like I was proposing some sort of gatekeeping, and I think that's appropriate to kind of, and this is actually not just for psychedelics, but any kind of substance, and stuff with like more physiological effects too, not just like something that could be used. I guess there's different types of recreational usage, a much different experience you can have, but. The point being, of course, I think there is a more ethical use to these things, and if you're going to encourage it, you should probably encourage it in a good way. But that's also like to say a more localized idea of kind of encouraging good usage. So exactly when it comes to, you're not going to create large scale legal regimes kind of restricting the use or the study of different substances, and kind of creating a regime where you are heavily taxing or whatever, but just kind of that locally you create a positive and really prohibition free environment where it's hard, and it's hard to see, because you don't see that necessarily. I don't think you can really turn the time on prohibition. But one thing that I've always harped on is how you get a lot of substances that are naturally occurring that were consumed in readily available forms for quite a long time, that are just off the table because prohibition is encouraged abusive behaviors and consuming substances very concentrated amounts, just because of the nature of prohibition and concealing something basically that's considered illegal, that'll put you in jail for having. And it's kind of sad, because there's a lot of useful things. There's a lot of substances and plants and stuff that can be used. I mean, you're thinking of something like, I don't know, an example I think of, and maybe there's is or isn't better substitutes for this, but like coca. I mean, people used to chew coca leaves, and it was like no thing. And cocaine has a much different idea of it. And sure, there's probably other stimulants out there if you want to go and you want to find some other stimulants, but stimulants are to some extent stimulants. And I don't know. I think that the idea of prohibition itself kind of warps, because it tries to create something at a mass scale. Whereas I do think that you see some moves towards even with cannabis. I think people more using it as an additive, and I don't know where I stand on heavy use of like edibles and stuff like that. But like I said, a lot of that still comes from prohibition and the idea of concentrating and heavy use and stuff like that. Whereas, I think in the past, before there was a concept of that you would see, I guess what's almost been reinvented is microdosing, but they wouldn't even thought of it that way,
Sure. Sec, what do you got?
I would just say that I'm pretty against the gatekeeping. I welcome the chaos. Democratize everything and let the chips fall where they may. I don't like priest class. It's just not. No, I don't like it. But unless anybody's got something to add, we can wrap up here. I know we've been going a while, so.
Ellen,
I think
anything
I'm
else?
good.
You're good?
Yeah. I mean, just as far as that question goes, I agree with Sec.
Right on. Okay.
What about you, Brian?
Yeah,
Gatekeeping?
drugs for
No?
everybody. That's good.
Me gatekeeping. I'm pro knowledge, and so just people being aware. I did like what Penguin say about locality. Keeping it more local, because that allows you to create a system of trust, which is the real way. To do anything between humans. So is to have a basis of trust.
I see problems of abuse with like any kind of. I'm not saying you're advocating for this, but any kind of gatekeeping. That's a power dynamic there that can easily be abused. It's just that's my fear with that sort of thing. So let everybody do their own thing, rather than have priests.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely say I'm pro chaos.
I am also okay. Good, pro chaos.
I am pro chaos overall. Yeah,
chaos agents all around.
Yes.
Well, all right. We'll wrap it up here. Ellen, thank you for coming on. I appreciated your perspective on this. That was, I think this was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome anytime. Hopefully everybody can glean something off of this. And honestly, I think you kept it less weird. So you kept us like under. Yeah, it's all. I'm blaming you for that. You kept us.
I know. I'm always like staying on topic.
I know. Terrible.
I know it. Jesus, that's not very chaotic at all. I don't like it.
I'll try to do drugs before I come on next time.
I mean, I'll do some drugs before I come on.
We're really going to go into the void. All right.
Deep into the void.
Yeah, deep.
Yeah, we'll have some other guests from other dimensions. You know what I mean? All right. Well, yeah.
Telepathically through us.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. Anyway, well, everybody listening, be excellent to each other. Thanks again, Brian and Ellen.
Pleasure as always, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Definitely.
Great conversation.
Yeah, for real. Anytime. All right. Well, peace, everybody, and have yourselves a good rest of your weekend.
Peace.
Peace.
Yep. Ciao.